Welcome. My name is Tom Clay. I'm chair of the Westford Select Board, and I'll invite my colleagues to introduce themselves here shortly. The purpose of the meeting tonight is, this is not an official in-session meeting for either the Select Board or the school committee. Our goal tonight is to run through logistics for the meeting, kind of explain how we got here, open up for questions. I think there's a number of people who are joining us from the public by Zoom. We have a gentleman here who's joining us as well. We'll go through any questions the public has, but we also have collected many frequently asked questions over time, and we'll walk through those as well. And we'll be here as long as there are questions that people have that they'd like to talk about. So, Dan, do we know which slide set we'd like to start with?
Were we doing logistics first, Kristen? Is that the plan?
Yes, I just brought those slides up, and Angela can speak to that.
Okay, super.
So do you want to do introductions first before we get into that? I can take those slides down.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Kristen Loss is joining us remotely tonight, town manager. Chris?
Yes, I'm Christopher Chu. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Westford.
I'm Dan O'Donnell, the finance director for the town.
I'm Angela Harkness, town moderator.
Scott Hazelton, vice chair of the select board.
Valerie Young, school committee chair.
And I don't know if any of our finance committee colleagues are joining remotely, but
I see Chris Sanders out there.
okay, great. We may or may not be welcoming some of our finance committee partners who've been part of this process as well. Okay, thank you, Kristen. Great point. So why don't we do the logistics first?
Yeah, so town meeting will be this Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. on the Westford Academy football field. Many of you may know that this is a rescheduled town meeting because we've had so much interest in these topics that we had more people at the originally scheduled meeting in March than we were able to hold at the building where it was scheduled. So this time we'll be on the field. We are fully prepared for 3,100 people. We have all the things in place that would accommodate that. And if there's more than that, we will do our best to accommodate more and try to make sure that this gets done on Saturday. Check-in for the meeting will start at 8 a.m., although the meeting itself is not starting until 9 a.m. There'll be parking at Westford Academy, and in addition, there'll also be parking at Crisafulli, Robinson, and the Abbott schools. You may park wherever you wish. You can park at any of those schools that are closest to you. There'll be buses running back and forth from those locations to Westford Academy to shuttle people back and forth. We'll have both regular school buses and Council on Aging buses, and the Council on Aging buses can accommodate anybody who has special needs and may need to be transported in those, but they'll take others as well, of course. The drop-off will be at Westford Academy. And at Westford Academy, in addition to those who are being bused there from other locations, we have plenty of handicapped accessible parking for anybody with special needs. There are plenty of spaces there, and in addition there is an entrance to the field especially for people with wheelchairs or walkers who need a flatter surface to get in. Okay, so here is the diagram of the exterior area of Westford Academy. And you can see that towards the bottom of the page where it says return pickup area, that's where the buses will stop to pick people up to go back to their cars at Crisafulli, Abbott, and Robinson. When the buses arrive, they'll come in from Hartford Road, go around that return bus pickup area over to the red square. And that red square is the main entrance to the meeting. Does somebody have a mouse that they can, or does Kristen have those slides?
Yeah,
is that what it is?
the mouse.
Okay, it's okay. Don't worry,
Oh,
Kristen.
there she goes. She's
There you go. I was showing the town meeting entrance, the red square. Yeah, thank you. So that's where most people will enter, and many people will know that from having gone to games at Westford Academy. And we'll talk about what's going on inside the field and how the seating's arranged and everything in just a minute. So you can see all of the parking around the building. The blue areas that are outlined in red are the handicap accessible parking spaces. Folks who are holding signs will again be at the entrances to the car entrances to the Westford Academy site. And people who are handing out leaflets or getting petition signatures will be in the green square right there. Those folks will stay in those areas, so they won't in any way impede folks who are walking in to vote. I think that's all for this slide. Is the next one the field itself?
Yep, just give me a moment, I'll bring
Yep.
that up.
Yep. So when you arrive at Westford Academy, while we're waiting for Kristen to put that next slide up, you'll enter either through that entrance that was pointed out, the red square, or the handicapped entrance. And in the middle of those two things, directly between those two entrances, is where the tellers are going to be. And the tellers are the people who check you in and make sure that you're a registered voter. So here we go. The two entrances are right there. And on the other side, that's the regular entrance. This is the accessible entrance. And then after you get in there, in the middle, you'll see the tables, which is where the tellers will be. They'll be checking everybody in. They will hand you a clicker, which is the voting device, the electronic voting device you'll use as they check you in, and then you can go and select your seat. So this is all the seating that Kristen is showing you. There's going to be, I think, 2,000 seats on the field. Can anybody confirm that? Is it 2,000 seats on the field?
I think I
It's
saw
a
that, yeah.
little bit over.
Yeah.
Okay. 2,000 seats on the field, so there'll be plenty of seating for everybody there. People may also sit themselves in the regular bleachers in the back. You'll be a bit farther away, but if that's certainly your prerogative if you'd like to sit there. So anyone who wants to speak to the meeting can do so at any one of the 6 microphones. So there are 4 right in the center of all the seating, where Kristen's showing you now, and 2 microphones up in the bleachers. The assistant moderator, Paul Alphin, will be in the back of the voter seating, between the voter seating and the bleachers, just to give me a heads up in case there's somebody I don't see. If they're trying to speak and I haven't seen them, he'll let me know that I've missed somebody. We are going to have an LED screen that will have at the front, that will have all of the articles shown on it. It's a large screen, but I just want to warn people that it may be difficult to see in the sun. If you need to see that screen, if you feel that you really want to see that screen, you should choose a seat closer to the front. You'll be happier if you do that. So when you leave, your clicker will remain with you for as long as you are there at town meeting. Only when you leave the premises will you hand in your clicker, and your clicker return areas are right by the doors. That's where you'll be handing in your clickers. At lunchtime, if you're remaining on the property for lunch, you keep your clicker with you. There's going to be pizza served, regular and gluten-free for purchase, cash purchase only, in the cafeteria. You can take your clicker into the cafeteria and buy your pizza there. Or you are also welcome to bring a bag lunch and eat your lunch anywhere on the Westford Academy premises. So we've done a lot to try and make sure that everybody's accommodated and that we can hold a successful and efficient town meeting. We would ask people to try to carpool if you can, so we don't run out of parking spaces. We think we've got enough planned, but it would be very helpful if people could carpool. We have free childcare and free transportation. I think today is the last day to sign up for that.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Thursday.
Okay,
They've
tomorrow is the last day to sign up for that, so if anybody needs to sign up for the free childcare or free transportation, please go to the town website. On the town meeting page, you'll find a link to the sign up, or also on the town moderator's page, you'll find links to both of those sign ups. All non-voters will be seated in the guest bleachers, which are behind the stage where the moderator and the screen will be. And we really need to keep the non-voters in that area so that we know we have enough seats for voters on the field. And that includes high school students who are not registered voters. I welcome them to come and watch the meeting, but we really need them to sit in the non-voter area, so we're reserving the seats on the field for the voters. There will be some pop-up comfort tents if people need to get into the shade for a while, or if they need anything else, there'll be an MRC tent there in case there are any issues. And of course, there'll be an ambulance on site, which we always have. I think that's about it. Happy to answer any questions that might come up.
Just for, Angela, for a first-time attendee, it might seem like I'm going to go to town meeting. I know what the warrant is. They're going to call for the vote for the first item. I'm going to vote, then the second, then the third. I'm just going to walk right through it. Is that how it typically goes at town meeting?
Yeah, so when we start the meeting at 9 o'clock, I'll first give some introductory remarks, which will have some instructions about how the meeting goes on and how we do things. Immediately after that, I'll probably do a consent agenda, which is a small number of articles that really don't engender any discussion, and we want to get them over with and out of the way. And right after that, probably between 9:15 and 9:30, we'll move to Article 1. We're going to do Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4 together because they're all budget articles, and I'm sure you all will explain more about that. I'm not going to go into any detail. And then we'll just move through the articles one by one. We have 22 articles on the warrant. For each article, once the motion is made and seconded, anyone who has a question or wants to make a comment or try to convince people to vote one way or the other is welcome to approach the microphone and do that. And if you've never been to town meeting before, people definitely do take advantage of that right. And the discussion will continue until either somebody makes a motion to terminate the discussion, or I determine that we've had enough discussion. Once people start repeating themselves, it really doesn't make sense to continue, and then we move to a vote. And the only other thing that's different is that we scheduled the budget items to be first, and we scheduled the MBTA zoning article to be first after lunch, just so people who want to be there for those items know when they're going to be discussed. So we'll probably break for lunch from 12 to 12:45 if everything's running smoothly and on time. And then immediately when we come back from lunch, we'll do the zoning articles, which includes the MBTA article.
Thank you. Val, you have a question?
Yeah, I think you said in a different meeting, one of our many, that you wouldn't take a motion to move the question right away because these are so complicated that you want to allow some discussion. Could you repeat that?
Right. So it's really my job to make sure that the voters have enough information to make an informed decision on the article that's before them, and to make sure that, for the most part, any questions the voters have been answered. So as a result, even though there are some people who've been to all of our meetings and understand everything about each and every article and want to vote on it immediately to save time, if someone made a motion to move the question immediately, and I felt that really there were many people who had questions or wanted more information, I would not accept that motion.
Okay. And likewise, sorry, can you speak to the motion to reconsider?
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, there is a method by which a voter can ask that something that's already been decided be reconsidered. If there's no town bylaw addressing what can and can't be reconsidered, that's totally within the moderator's discretion whether or not to accept a motion to reconsider something. So I've said in advance, and I'm going to stick to it for this meeting, between now and the next town meeting, we're going to try and create a bylaw so everybody knows what the rules are for this. But for this town meeting, I'm not going to accept any motions to reconsider something that's already been finally voted unless it's because of a technical error. For example, if the motion that was spoken or appeared on the screen said $100,000 and it was supposed to be $10,000, then I would accept a motion to reconsider, but not just to go back and have a redo. Not going to allow that.
And for budget articles, we give people an opportunity to comment and ask questions about every line. It's not every line item, but it's every principal category that's listed in the warrant. So if anyone is coming and expecting that this is going to be a 10-minute discussion, it's probably better to expect that it'll take, I would think, a couple hours probably to get through the budget, because it's such an important issue. There are many parts. It affects everybody. So just so people have an expectation that.
So without going into any detail about the budget itself, because the first 4 articles all pertain to the budget, I'm going to allow the discussion to be about all 4 articles, but we'll only be voting on them one at a time. And in addition, we'll have a discussion for Article 1, which is the override, an overall discussion about the override, and then I will go through each line item, as we always do, and ask if people have specific questions about those line items. And I actually will not accept a motion to terminate discussion, to move the question until after we've gotten through the line items.
Okay, I think that's a great setup. I don't know if there's any questions either here or online about logistics or the basic structure of things. If not, we can go ahead and move to maybe an abbreviated version. Kristen, I don't know if you have or if Dan wants to pull up. Maybe just, I don't know if we want to give kind of a quick speed walk through just where we are, how we got here.
We do have a slide on the budget
And I'll let you handle these slides.
which might be a good one to start with.
Yeah, once you pull it up, and we'll
Sure.
we can fill in the gaps if there are any from here. So while we're pulling this up, in January, so not quite 18 months ago, we began to get a clear sense that a number of the big budget drivers that affect us, things like special education funding, things like energy, things like waste removal, big heavy-duty line items that drive a lot of money and provide a lot of services for the town, we're going to see a much bigger increase than we had seen historically. And there were a couple reasons for that. One is that, as everyone knows, inflation began to pick up as we moved out of COVID. That affected a lot of things. Commodity prices, which affects our energy costs, had gone up significantly since the last time we had a contract. Our waste hauler, who had been our waste hauler for 25 years, was retiring. It's basically the guy who owns that company is the guy who drives the truck. Westford no longer will have the advantage of that special relationship, so we had to go out to a normal open bid. Many, many things that drive our budget were going to be not on a slow 2.5% line, but we're going to see big jumps. So we saw that coming almost a year and a half ago and commissioned a budget task force. This was members of some of the elected committees before you, the Finance Committee, also some people at large, some citizens at large, I should say, town staff. And we spent, it was a sprint of many months to go through and look at how efficient is Westford by budget line category? How do we compare with other towns? How is our purchasing process organized? Have we made any mistakes? Where are there gaps that we might be able to find additional savings? What are the things that we should expect if we're going to forecast not just 1 year, but over several years, so we can understand where we are and try to solve this problem in a more organized way instead of just looking 1 year out. So thanks to the heroic work of the Budget Task Force, many of these things we got some good numbers on, we were able to look at comprehensively. And I've already mentioned a couple of these big drivers. The short answer, though, is we said, okay, we're not going to be able to come to the taxpayer and ask them to cover this gap. It's just way too big. When we started off, there was a $10 million gap. We knew that we were going to have to make some reductions on the town school services side. We knew we were going to have to be very efficient. We knew we were going to have to sign up for future savings targets in the out years as we were putting together this budget. We knew that we were going to have to find some efficiencies in the near term. We renegotiated our waste contract and had significant savings. We may have found some other opportunities for savings in the near term. But even after all of that, we saw that without going to the taxpayer to ask for some additional funding in the form of an override, we're going to face really significant service reductions in some of the critical areas that we enjoy, like people who plow the snow, our first responders that come and help us when we have problems at home or have a fire, And in the schools especially, we're going to see really significant budget reductions. There's no way in a budget like ours, which is really almost entirely driven by people, to make a multi-million-dollar reduction suddenly without reducing a lot of people. And so what we did is, through a long process with our finance committee, we had many public meetings, dozens of public meetings to go through each category carefully and thoughtfully to find out where we thought the best balance point was between our reluctance to ask the taxpayer for more money, our enthusiasm for finding savings opportunities, and our reluctance to reduce the services that made our town such a great place to live. Finding that tricky balance point was the mission over many meetings. We ended that process with $1.5 million pulled out of the budget from where we started. We said we think we can do better a few times and reduce that guidance to town and schools several times. We found some additional opportunities for savings. We asked some good questions that we put into our roadmap and our planning for things to look at, and ended up with the plan that we have before folks today. It's important that we're ready to answer lots of questions. There are lots of questions from the public. We've had lots of questions. We know that there are people with different opinions about where that balance point should be, and that's a very reasonable question to ask. Through a long process, many opportunities for public input, lots of close scrutiny from a lot of people, we have before you, we think, is the right balance point. Collectively, we think, you can look at the votes of the various committees in support of this, but collectively, we think this is the right balance point that preserves critical services, sets up aggressive goals for us to find additional cost savings in the future, and does go and ask the taxpayer to help support this in the way that's in front of you. So I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the meeting. We'll have many more opportunities to ask and answer questions then. All right, does anyone up here feel like, by way of overview, we should touch on anything else that maybe I've missed?
It's a pretty nice summary you just gave.
Okay, but we don't have to have more. So we have a couple things that we have teed up. We have frequently asked questions that we've heard, and I'll try to ask some of those of the person who, if it's a school-related question, I'll probably ask someone in the schools. If it's a town-related question related to detailed finances, I'll probably ask Dan. Also, Valerie prepared a very nice summary that she presented at the school committee meeting that we may ask to go through. But before we do that, why don't we ask if there's any questions, either from people here in the public, and we'll definitely go to you first. Also, if you're online, if you'd like to ask any questions, you can raise your hand virtually, and we'll make sure we get to you as well. So if you'd please like to come up to the microphone. The microphone is not going to magnify your voice here, but it does pick it up for people who are watching on cable or will be watching the tape.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Scott Surrey. I'm on Sassafras Road. I've been in town for 35 years,
Welcome.
and I just recently retired. And I have to admit that in the 34 years leading up to that, I didn't pay too much of attention to the budget. No, I assumed that the recommendations that were coming from the officials were good, but that's changed. So now I'm on fixed income, don't have any kids in the school system. I feel like I'm being taxed out of my house. And when I look at what's being presented to me to make decisions on, I feel like I don't have enough information. And I want to know why it is that we can go with our hands out to the taxpayers without giving much information to justify the expenditures. And I'll just give a couple examples off the top of my head. So I think we're asking for a new ambulance. And it's the cost to purchase the vehicle and to equip it. So why can't we move the equipment out of the current ambulance and into the new one? Has that been considered? What about buying a used one that's newer, better than what we currently have? Was that considered? Who do we go to source this? Is there one source that we traditionally always go to and they give us the highball price, or do we shop around? Who are those sources? What did they offer us? These are like questions that you would expect to ask of like an employee on a project that you are responsible for. Did you do your due diligence? Let me ask you some questions to make sure that you did. And yet we don't seem to anticipate those questions and give those answers as part of the warrant articles. I mean, in this day of online business, there's no reason why we have to condense everything down to one sheet with, 20 articles or so on it with a couple of lines each. There should be volumes of information. I want to see if we go out to bid for something like I don't know, one of the things was like a plow truck, I think, for the fire department. I thought we paid for heated driveways at the fire department. Why do we need a plow truck? Why can't we use the highway plow truck if we have heated driveways at the fire station? It seems like these are questions that, especially if you've been in town for a while, you can anticipate being asked, and those should be part of the backup information to the warrant article.
So a couple questions there. Were you
I
gonna
just
say
want to
something?
say one thing before we get, I'm sure there'll be
Yeah, so
answers
thank
to the
you-
questions.
Thank you for the question. I think we're going
Yes.
to break it apart because there's a couple of questions there we'd like to answer.
I just want to
Break it
say the
apart and answer.
town meeting part. So if you were standing on the floor at town meeting asking those very legitimate questions, I would refer them to the person who could answer them, and you would get an answer right then and there. It's great that you're doing this ahead of time, so perhaps you can get some answers ahead of time, but those answers will be available for people on the floor of town meeting. These are the types of questions we get, and we spend a lot of time making sure there'll be somebody available to answer these types of questions.
But my objection to the process is why, if you are already anticipating those questions, why isn't there like a PowerPoint slide deck or something
I'll let others answer that.
that gives that states the question and gives the answer ahead of time, so people have time to digest it instead of being hot and bothered by the parking and the weather and all that to get the town meeting. All you want to do is get out of there, frankly, after you cast your vote. Instead, give us the information well ahead of time so that we can digest it at a normal pace.
Kristen has her hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so,
gonna say,
yeah,
we
let's
talked about
take,
the capital
there's a lot of good
process.
questions in there and a lot of questions a lot of people will have. So,
Let's
Kristen,
answer.
Kristen, yeah, do you want to respond first and then we can build from there?
Sure. So thank you so much for your interest in this. A lot of people are not aware of the processes that we go through. Starting in December of 2023, I presented a budget to the select board, which they reviewed in very great detail. And then we also went line by line with the finance committee throughout the month of January and February and reviewed those documents. All of those documents are on the webpage under town meeting, as well as under the finance committee's packets. Also, all of these meetings were taped on WCAT, so they can go back and be watched again. So I understand that someone who may not be immersed in town government all the time may not know where to find these documents. So we're happy to help people find them in an easier way. Again, they are all linked off the town meeting page that we sent out, that link in the blue postcard that you may have received last week, as well as in some of the news flashes and social media posts that we had. I would like Dan to answer some of the specific questions related to ambulance and enterprise accounts and how we go about purchasing. Before he does that, I just want to highlight for you and members of the public that Massachusetts municipalities are held to a very high standard regarding purchasing. We're held to Massachusetts General Law Chapter 30B, which requires us to go out to bid and take the lowest price at the most competitive bid for the services that we need. So many residents may not be aware of that law or that restriction, but we are required to do that. So Dan, would you go into the conversation just in high detail about the ambulance?
Sure. So the ambulance it's being purchased through the ambulance enterprise, which is like a separate business entity within the budget. So they raise revenue and they're able to spend that. And part of that is to buy capital, replace an ambulance every 3 years. So what we're proposing to do is purchase that and equip it. If the fire department can use other equipment out of an older ambulance, they absolutely will take that and bring it with it. But some of the equipment like the cots, stuff like that, they all expire after a certain number of years, and we're not allowed to use those anymore. So like whatever they can bring over, they do that and they save that equipment. With this particular ambulance, yes, we did get quotes before. We had a whole capital planning process that we began back in September. I believe we met 7 times and reviewed all the capital requests, and we made a recommendation as a committee as a whole to the town manager. So as part of that process, they do have to provide quotes for each of those pieces, and we will move forward if they don't have a quote. So they can be at the state bid list where the state does the bidding for us, or they can solicit the quotes themselves. So if the state bid looks a little bit high, they might go out and try to search for lower quotes elsewhere as well. So it's a typical process.
So I searched for such documentation online, and hunting through the Westford website to try to find that kind of stuff is like the most frustrating thing you can possibly imagine as somebody who's, a layman outsider to the process. Secondly, I've actually signed up for like the bid postings.
Yep.
Yeah, but you can't get any information. You have to contact whoever's issuing the bids, give them your information in order to get any details about what's out the bid. That's not right. The way you described it sounds like a very open process. All this information is there, but it's opaque to the average person like myself.
So,
If it's available online, it's so hard to find. It's like impossible.
yeah, so criticism accepted on accessibility of the information, just to explain what the scrutiny, just for members of the public, the scrutiny that we go through with this, Dan covered a lot of it. One place that you get exactly the questions you've asked, I think every question you asked exactly was asked during the Finance Committee hearings as we walk through. The Finance Committee meets over the course of 8 weeks or something, some long period of time. We break apart each budget and capital piece, and then the Finance Committee will write really detailed questions. Why aren't we using used equipment? Do we really need it this year? Can we go ahead and push it off for another year because the old one is still functional? All those are typically submitted in writing. They get answers in writing. They're discussed in open session. Sometimes we decide to wait. Sometimes we say, yeah, fair enough. We're going to wait another year. That's a good point. Not everything that gets proposed in capital gets funded. So there's a very diligent and complete level of scrutiny that is gone through by the appointed members of the Finance Committee, by members of the public who are able to come to those meetings, by elected board members that go to all those meetings. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that that the very thoughtful questions you've asked aren't asked, answered, scrutinized, and decisions made sometimes to not do things. That absolutely happens. Now, is that information as accessible as it should be to someone who's interested and should be able to just Google search, help me understand why we're buying this ambulance at this time? It would be better, certainly, if this information was easier to find. I know that's something the town is looking at now, is how do we create a better, more accessible set of public information. So I accept your criticism as completely fair, that if when you have time and are available to focus on this, and not everyone's available to, we know that, but when you are, it can be very hard to find this, and it can be very hard to get confident that a suitable level of scrutiny has been applied. So I think what we can do as a follow-up now is if you could give us your information, we can, I know this isn't a solution for everybody, but for you, we could actually direct you to where these questions came up in the Finance Committee and provide you with sort of the back and forth that happened as part of the process, if that's helpful.
Yes, if there is this compilation of supporting documentation, I think that would be like the most important URL to have included on that blue sheet that came out.
Yeah, so we'll do that. Certainly for you, we can maybe look at ways to make that more visible. To give you a sense of scale, there are, 40 hours and probably 500 pages of documentation at least. So it's an enormous amount. So when we're trying to communicate with the public, we're always left with, how do we address people that only have 30 seconds to put into it? How do we address people that have an hour to put into it? How do we address someone like you that's very interested, that wants to get into the detail? So we need to be great at all three of those, and maybe we're not. But the information is available. It's a huge amount of information, so we don't typically try to make that available to everybody, because that would seem overwhelming. But we should definitely make it easy to find for those that want it. So
I think it should
fair-
leave it
fair
up to
point.
the reader for them to figure out what's overwhelming, and just give everybody access to whatever you have.
Yeah, we try to make it a choose your own adventure, like want to learn more, click, want to learn more, click, and have it
Yeah.
balloon out and expand. But I don't think we're great at that, and I think we can put time into being better at that. So I think it's a fair
The
point.
town meeting page that Kristen was referring to is a good place to find documentation relative to what's going to be discussed at town meeting. So and it's under the government tab. It just says town meeting. And when you click on there, then you'll get another link for a 2024 annual town meeting. And then under that is a ton of stuff. Not the level of detail that Tom's talking about in the big stuff, but a good bit of information about what's going to be discussed at town meeting.
And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I didn't mean to nitpick or anything. I just did it, as somebody who is now very concerned about where my money is going because fixed income now. This is probably happening to a lot of people in town, I guess. You know, we're kind of aging out of the community, and we're getting more focused in on the budget, and it just seems like, whereas before I could afford to be sort of apathetic to the decisions that were being made, now I can't be apathetic. And when I want the information, I should be able to easily get at it.
Yeah, I don't know, Kristen, do you have any other comments? I know you've been really focused on trying to make sure we're communicating to the public well. I don't know if there's anything else on this topic that is top of mind for you.
No, I just, again, thank you for coming and voicing your concerns. We are working on updating the webpage and doing better with outreach. Don't hesitate to call our departments as well. Feel free to call the town manager's office or the finance director or the fire department if there are specific questions related to certain things. And that goes for anyone in the community. I know it is easy just to sit at your computer and try to type and find it on your own, but it's certainly not a bother to give us a call at the town hall and ask those questions. We're more than happy to spend time either on the phone or in-person meetings to help people find that information when they need it.
Kristen, when we record meetings like the capital planning meetings that aren't, that don't go through WestfordCAT, are those recordings of all those meetings, are those also posted on the website?
We do send those to WCAT as well.
We
So,
do, okay,
yes,
so it
you
is
can find
going,
that
so even though
online,
they
yeah.
didn't actually record it, because
Right.
we'll do it through Zoom.
Yeah, we just send the recording right to them,
Okay,
so
okay,
that's
all right.
available as well if you want to watch the capital planning meetings, but.
And I didn't mean to pick on like the fire department or anything
No,
like
no.
that.
No,
Those
no.
were
It's
just
a good
two
example.
examples that
No.
came to mind.
It was actually a really easy, clear example, so that was good to.
Yeah, and I think it's natural for people to, I mean, it's a lot to ask for, and it's, you know, before I got very involved in government, I think I would often look at it and question whether due process had been gone through, question whether, you know, just good practice, you know, are they doing it, how does the bid process work, why do these things cost so much? I mean, like, it seems like an unbelievable amount of money, how much an ambulance costs, but there is good practice here. We're required by law, as Kristen said. We do put everything out to bid in a very systematic way, so it's,
That's why
there is good process under the hood, and we can do better at helping people get access to that.
That's why I just thought it's also, because you mentioned the finance committee meetings, which is again, that other layer where we're asking these questions. But I think it is an important thing for us to be able to communicate to people all of those capital planning meetings that take place in the first place, because the questions that you just asked, they are asked by the capital planning committee when each department, we all bring whatever requests we have, and we have to have all of the documentation to support what those requests are. And then the capital planning committee will go through the process of determining whether they support the request or not. And so whether that, like even those meetings, the minutes of those meetings, that information, whether that's easily accessible to people, I think is a good point, right? Because we know that it's happened, and we know that those meetings are taking place and those questions are being asked. But if it's not something that somebody can just find,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily help. So we need to do better with figuring out that.
And I think WestfordCAT does a great job, you know, keeping this all together, filming what they film and taking what we film and putting it together. But we could probably do a better job directing people to those videos, because they can sometimes be a little hard to find. I think we could maybe do a better job posting links to those videos of the meetings on the town web pages. And I really would like to thank you, because we don't know how to fix things unless people tell us what's wrong.
Right.
So it's really important that we hear from people about what they're finding wrong with the system.
And I was just gonna add, sorry, I know we're like talking about redesigning the website, so one thing that I'm thinking about from this is how to corral these processes, right? Like, can all the FinCom questions be put in one place so that you don't have to go to a meeting packet, guess which one was that date, was talked about on that date? Nope, that's the wrong one, back out, pick another one.
Yeah.
I've been there. Even, I'm in those meetings and I'm still like, wait, I thought it was that one, nope, it's the other one, back and
Right,
forth.
you're guessing dates.
Yes.
You're like, oh, I think it
Right.
was around the
And
middle of
there
January.
is a table on, if you go to the budget page, the budget landing page, there is a table way at the bottom that does show which departments were reported out at which FinCom meetings to skip one of those steps. But I agree that it would be helpful if you clicked on this one button and saw, here's all the FinCom questions and answers labeled by departments. And the other thing I'm hearing too is like a description of the capital process, right? Like, I can't think of a place where I could send somebody and say, here's a description of 30B requirements, and here's, you know, the one place to check out our process.
As part of that process, you know, one of those other itching questions I have is, I don't think I've ever seen a description in any warrant article about, for capital items. So what's being done with the existing equipment? I mean, it's being, even if it's scrapped, there's value to it. Okay, well, how does that get accounted for?
It's about outside the scope of the actual articles. We're approving the new one, not the sale of the existing one, but, you know, we do have to, you know, it's still under 30B to, you know, get rid of equipment. We still have to follow those same laws, so we do.
Well, that's true for the ambulance, right? But does that cover everything? Non-fire department, you know, school computers?
Yep, and trucks,
Covers everything?
any of the trucks and
Okay.
things like that.
Is there a dollar value? Do you happen to know? It's, because it's probably not pencils, but there's some,
Yeah.
almost everything that's worth anything has to go through that
Yeah, I think it's
process.
anything over $500, we either trade in or we put up for public surplus to make sure that we're getting some sort of value back. That goes back into the general fund and then is used for future purchases.
Sometimes we also trade down, so if we've got a vehicle was a police cruiser that's got 2 high miles for the police department, we could repurpose that into, say, permitting or so it stays in town under a different owner.
So I just want to make sure you understood the first part of Dan's answer, which was that it can't be in the warrant article. What we do with the scrapped equipment wouldn't be in the warrant article, because that's not part of what we're voting on at town meeting.
Oh, right, but it would help people understand, like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's part of the backup documentation. It wouldn't be in the
supporting
warrant itself.
documentation to know.
Yeah, is the $500,000 really $500,000, or is it $500,000 minus the $100,000 that we're gonna get for the trade-in or whatever, you know, and so.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a good, so we need to think more about sort of an intro to, sort of the starting point that you presented with us, like, why were these decisions made? What's the process that governs it? How can, you know, what's the best practice that's being observed in this case? And then sort of a map to these different processes and where I can find the answers. So,
There's a lot of good information in the Finance Committee book, too, that they send out. So they have a whole section on capital as well. So if you're looking for an overview of that, you can read that, too.
yeah, I think a lot of it.
Do you know how to get to that? Just out of curiosity, do you know how to find that
a good
finance
question.
book?
And so I actually have found that
Okay,
one.
good.
Fantastic.
But I have to admit, I was pretty ticked when it was like 2 days after one of the most recent town meetings that report came out. It's like, wait a minute, you asked for us to vote on stuff that's spending money, and then 2 days later, a report comes out that says, oh, by the way, we're like $8 million in the hole, or whatever. If it's the
think
same
that
report I'm
happened.
I
thinking
don't
of.
know.
No.
No, the finance committee book is a book that comes out before each town meeting, explaining, well, no, before annual town meeting only.
15
Right.
days before, yeah.
15 days before annual town meeting, and it explains the expenditures that are in the budget for that town meeting. So it's a very particular type of document that relates only to the upcoming town meeting.
Yeah, so this was, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong document then, so I apologize, but it was
No,
like right
that's
after
okay.
right after you voted to expend money, something arrived in my inbox from the town that said, here's this report, and the bottom line of the report was, holy crap, we're in a lot of trouble here financially.
That might have been the
It could have been the
budget
Budget
task force report.
which
yeah.
published in
I think that's right.
May or
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but
October, we published.
October. So it would have been right after the fall town
Oh,
meeting.
Probably.
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close to the fall town meeting. So that lineup makes sense, that we might have had fall town meeting.
And then the
Where
budget task
we-
force report came
We
out.
don't address the entire budget, but we address a lot of things related to the budget. And then the budget task force report came out pretty shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it just seems like it should have been a little before having to vote on things where you're spending money instead of just after you vote.
Right. Well, the scope of things that we vote on in October are kind of true-up issues, but I understand your point. Your point is, if we're talking about spending money, even if it's an adjustment and sort of fine-tuning of the budget we already voted on back in March, if we're there and talking about money, it'd be good to, raise the issue since it's coming up.
Yeah, and perception means
Yeah.
a lot. And I guess my perception was, wow, this seems kind of disingenuous to put this out a couple of days after we voted on something. So,
Okay.
But the budget task force was pertained to the coming town meeting, not to the
Sure.
October town meeting, so.
Exactly. It was a forward-looking look at fiscal '25, '6, '7. Anything that was covered in October town meeting would have been related to fiscal '24 adjustments. So anyway, I think the general point is right. If we think we're sailing into a financial crisis, it's helpful if we're talking about that when we're making any decisions about money.
Yes. That's
So I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
We didn't approve money for fiscal '25 and then report on the crisis for fiscal '25. Anything that happened in October was related to the previous year.
Anyway, I thank you so much for letting me take up so much of your time.
No, I
Thank
think
you.
any concerns you have, other people are going to have too, so
Yeah.
Right,
appreciate it.
you're speaking for others.
Right.
Well, that was
So
my
thank you.
impression, is that a lot of
Yeah.
people that I've talked with had these same kinds of questions. So
Right.
I figured I'd show up
Yeah,
and
yeah, and the
Thank you.
town's
articulate
not a
them.
black box, so you can call and ask questions of anybody you want to.
Yeah.
All the staff is here for.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can put your email in chat for anyone that's online, and maybe we can make sure we connect you guys so we can follow up, and the stuff we just talked about, we should send you links to so you can see what it looks like.
And I
The
talked-
FinCom meetings that covers the ambulance, for example.
Yeah, I talked to the fire department, because the news station, the aprons are heated. The parking areas for the visitors, for the staff is not heated. And stations 3 and 4 in NAB and Rogers, those are not heated. So those need to get plowed, but talk to the fire department about.
Seems like it'd be a lot cheaper
As I
to
talked to the fire
contract for a
department, yeah.
plow driver to go plow that than to buy a plow.
Just correct the record that it's not all heated, only one piece of one station's heated, but it's
Fair.
fair question.
Yeah,
by all
and the
means.
chief could explain to you, and unfortunately, each of these is its own rabbit hole to go down.
Yep.
So if you've got 10 questions, let's answer them.
I'm done.
I think it's related to the emergency nature. If there's snow, we got to clear it right away because we're responding to emergencies. We can't have a contractor. Anyway, but each of these has its own answer, and the chief can answer that one better than I can, I'm sure.
Okay, and again, I'm not trying to pick on that fire. Those are just examples that came right to the forefront because they were simple, like you're saying, and,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, those are
illustrative
good
of the
examples.
general problem.
Thank
So,
you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no,
it.
Well,
thank you.
you for
Thanks for
coming
coming.
forward.
So I think we're
Great.
Please, welcome.
That was
Hi.
great.
James Shuley, 19 Flushing Pond Road, lived in town since '92, so I guess about 34 years.
Okay.
And I kind of lost track during COVID of town meeting. I don't know even if it was held in person or not, but I was avoiding crowds. So
Was outdoors during COVID.
So
I would just want to say, whether or not anyone's been engaged up to this point does not merit the validity of your
Right.
question or not.
Right.
You could have moved in yesterday. We
Right.
will still take your questions. We still report to you. We'd
Right.
love to hear your feedback. So you don't have to lead up with that, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have 3 questions about traditional budget buster, which is health insurance, and I guess I noticed in the final budget task force report, executive summary, review Westford's health insurance strategy to ensure it's the most cost-effective course. The expenses of our partially self-funded healthcare strategy have been far higher than forecasted over the past 12 months. So my first question is, would you mind clarifying what the current structure is of the town's health insurance program in terms of what percent is self-insured and what is through a conventional insurance company?
Dan, if you like.
Sure. So for all of our employees and retirees that are not yet 65, they're on what's called the self-insured plan, the active plan. So the split on that for the basic plan is 65% town and 35% employee share. Anybody who's 65 goes on to Medicare, which is far cheaper. So, it's about $1.5 million a year for the Medicare. And, overall, the budget for the health insurance, the active plan, is about $12 million per year,
I think,
the town share.
I think maybe the question was about the structure of the plan. So by being self-insured, what does that mean?
Oh, so
Percent is a town
it's a high deductible.
self-insured versus
Gotcha.
through a conventional insurance purchase.
So this is somewhat new that we became self-insured in March of '22. So we're basically self-insured. However, we purchase what's called stop-loss insurance. So any claims over $125,000, those are covered by the stop-loss carrier. So we're mostly self-insured for the most part, but there's a point where we have insurance kick in and we are reimbursed for those costs.
And does Blue Cross and Blue Shield actually administer for the town?
Yep.
So their charges have gone up, what, 15% this year?
That's what the health insurance trust voted to increase the employee contribution this year.
Okay, well, thank you. And second question is what was the thinking behind going to the self-insurance strategy? And I guess, let me just make a statement before that. I worked in healthcare as a provider for 25 years, and just anyone who has looked at what's going on, where death and taxes are unavoidable, but so are health care cost increases greater than inflation. They're just dependable. The only question is how much. And in a situation where even the federal government that can print money can't get a handle on it, when prescription costs can be 10, 20, 30,000 a month, I'm concerned that the town doesn't, of taking on that risk. So that's what's behind the question. My concerns, what led the town to adopt the, and pardon me, did I miss, what percentage are we self-insured versus, we're totally self-insured
totally
with
self-insured
a
with stop-loss.
backup
With a cap.
stop-loss?
Yes.
Yeah. So what, I'm curious for anybody who, I apologize, totally, I missed it until now. I wasn't involved.
Dan, do you want to explain the process we went through to get advice, get bids?
Yep.
Believe that based on our population, this was going to be more affordable, and then what happened since?
Right, so before this, we had basically a canned Blue Cross product that was very expensive. We were paying per enrollee on that. And Blue Cross is making a lot of money off us the previous 3-4 years prior to COVID. So we started the process of exploring the self-insured, partially self-insured is what we call it, which we brought to the October 21 town meeting, I believe. Actually, it's October 2021, I believe, to move forward and ask town meeting to allow us to go to be self-insured. And when we hit into March of 22, that's when we finally had all of our ducks lined up, so we became active on the plan as of March 1st, 2022. Since that time, our large claims, which are over $100,000, have been 2 to 3 times higher than what has been normal in the past. So right off the bat, we got hit with some pretty heavy claims. Just a lot of serious things have happened, and part of it might be people going to the doctors after COVID. Instead of catching cancer at stage 1 or 2, it's at 3 or 4 at this point because of delayed health care. So we saw a lot of that come through initially off the bat. So, and that's why we increased our rates to help match the expenses as they're going down. But you're right, healthcare costs do increase on average quite a lot each year, much more than what Prop 2.5 can typically afford.
So we have an advisor that helps us with this. Based on the population data we had leading up to that decision, this would have been lower cost. In fact, in the first year, it appeared to be lower cost, but because what we were seeing in the population changed so much, we've now flipped onto the other side of it, where it's costing us more. What we're doing is we're the first opportunity we have to make a change, what we're doing is in November. So we've asked that in the summer, we get proposals again for all options. We're going to look at everything again from the bottom up and decide again what the right thing is for us. And we've seen other towns who went through the same journey end up in the same reconsideration. If you, in Acton, our neighbor, same math, did the same analysis, went onto a self-insured plan for the same reasons, had a benefit for a short period of time, it didn't go as they thought in terms of their population, so now they've reconsidered and moved to something else. So we are going to, at the first opportunity, look at something that might be better for us. But that's what happened. We had the information we had at the time, got the best advice we could. What actually happened in terms of our claims shifted dramatically, and now we're on the wrong side of it, and we have to fix it.
But I would just observe that we have to do an analysis of what it would cost if we were on a
Yeah.
conventional plan, because
good point.
we've had very unfortunate experience, like twice, 3 times the normal rate of serious disease. If we had been on a private plan, they would have raised our premiums too, because they don't operate to lose money. So we don't know for sure. This is
We have to
looks bad.
requote it all.
Yeah, but we would have had an increase in health insurance no matter what, a serious increase no matter what. Just a question of, are we paying back our own fund or paying an insurer, and which would be more profitable for the town? We don't really know, but that's what we need to investigate.
Yeah, yeah. So I shouldn't say we could stay on the plan, but we need to re-benchmark and re-quote everything to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, it seems like we're also dealing with an aging population, at least as I look at the
Yeah, statistically, it's aging slightly. You're right.
and adverse selection, which can really screw things up.
Yeah.
So at any rate, in terms of, I think anytime we're in a retail insurance plan, like the town has been, we're going to get, we're sitting ducks because of the small scale. And since in 2009, there was a motion at town meeting, when the state opened up the GIC,
Yep.
2 cities and towns, there was a motion in town meeting to have the town pursue that within an orderly number of years, and that didn't happen. Can you fill me in on the history of why the town hasn't taken advantage of the GIC, which is risk spread over
Right.
hundreds of thousands of millions,
Much bigger population.
millions of lives?
Yeah. I don't have
Annual
information
increases.
about what happened as follow-up to that item. I will say that is one of the options that will ask to be brought before us as we consider what to do now. So I don't know if anyone has information about how the follow-up, what actions followed that town meeting item. Unfortunately, I don't know. I wasn't part of it at that
That was
point.
before my time on the board. I mean, I would just observe that, the benefits for GICC are perhaps less generous than we had in our conventional plan. So there is that trade-off of cost.
I was going to say that I thought it had something to do with the employees not being as well protected
Right,
under
so it-
GIC. That's my recollection of what happened.
And I don't, so, yeah, I think there was an issue of perceived or actual
Right.
quality of plan. Again, that's what we have to investigate. Is it a perceived bad, is it perceived less well-covered plan, or is it actually less well-covered plan? We need to investigate that for the benefit of the employees. And if
And they
it's,
change from year to year.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, but it's definitely on the table for consideration, and we'll ask that be brought forward as one of the detailed proposals for us.
Kristen has her hand up.
Oh,
too.
I'm sorry, Kristen?
Sure, thank you. Would just encourage this resident, if they want to join our health insurance trust meetings. The next meeting is in June, and happy to do that. I know we have some other people on the line as well with some questions related to the budget and to town meeting next week. So I don't mean to derail the process. I know everyone's questions are very important, but any health insurance conversation we're happy to have offline.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Dan, maybe you could take us to the people who are online.
Okay.
This gentleman should leave his contact information so you can
Yeah,
send him.
could we make sure that if I just give you a piece of paper, can you write down your email
So
for
they
us so
can
we can
send
follow up
you
with both
the
those things?
information about when the meeting is.
Thanks.
You may have good advice. We want to take advantage of that.
You could write down your name and contact and also.
Next
ask
thing you know, you'll be on a committee.
Finance committees
Oh,
as
yeah.
well? They're all open to the public.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
definitely. And the hearings are also all open to the public.
All,
It's a flavor of their meeting, but yes. All meetings of that board, our board, school committee have to be posted and are public, open to the public.
Actually, all meetings.
Yes,
Yeah.
all
All
meetings.
capital
Any-
All meetings of any
Any
All
committee.
meetings
established
of any
committee.
Town
established
groups or
committee.
committees.
We have Tim Wickham out there. Tim, are you there?
Yeah, thank you.
I wonder if it was an ambulance answer, and then maybe,
Might have been.
That's true.
do we have any
So
resident
Dan,
questions?
can you see the questions that Kristen's referring to? Back up here, grab it.
Nope, I don't see any.
It was just Tim with his hand raised.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so maybe he was gonna
Okay.
help answer a question.
Contact, that'd be great. We'll follow up on that too. Okay, well, while we're here, let me just ask a couple of the frequently asked questions that we've collected.
That are frequently asked.
There are many meetings. So, Dan, the first one's for you. I see this balance in free cash. I see that we have a stabilization fund. This seems like a rainy day, if that's a rainy day fund. It looks like it's raining right now. Why aren't we tapping into that fund to meet part of our budget shortfall?
Okay, so the select board has a policy where that requires the town to keep 5 to 10% of its reserves set aside, and the reserves consist of free cash and a stabilization fund. We do have uses for free cash that we have every year. It's part of our capital plan. We use it for small budget adjustments typically. It's part of our perchlorate and our snow and ice deficit. However, those are planned drawdowns that we use each year. We do regenerate free cash to the use of, budget closeouts from the general fund and any revenue in excess of budget. So it's a nice system that kind of goes forward. We have a spending plan for our free cash, bring it down so low, then bring it back up, and that's how we fund our capital plan. Now, we don't apply free cash to our operating budget. It's not a good practice. It's applying one-time funds towards the operating budget, which if we did that, say, in this year where we have a $4.2 million deficit and a $3.9 million deficit next year, we're going to end up with an $8.1 million deficit next year. So it's really not a good solution to this. We have to manage the budget responsibly and make those difficult decisions as they come along each year. One other part is that, the town does issue bonds and we pay interest on those bonds. But we do go through a process with Standard & Poor's where bonds are rated. Right now, we're at AAA, which is just reconfirmed, and that's even though we have an override facing us. It's because AAA knows that we have a plan for whether or not the override passes or fails. So they know that management and the boards are being proactive in managing the town. So what happens if we get downgraded? If we deplete our reserves, first off, if something comes up, we have no safety net. And then also, we're going to be downgraded, most likely, in our rating, which means we're going to pay higher interest rates in future projects. So we have a bunch of projects coming up that, we'll pay more for if we are downgraded, if we have no reserves. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and it's not really a great short-term solution for the town to adopt.
Okay, so at a high level, if we see a spike in health insurance, for example, and we expect that to be a recurring cost in future budgets, if we try to plug it with free cash once, we have that same problem again next year, and we've got a lower reserve.
Well, we're actually starting next year in the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Right.
sort of what happened this year. We actually finished the year with the health insurance trust with a negative $387,000. So to put some money in there, we did use free cash to fund the health insurance trust. However, that creates a budget gap the following year. So we are trying to account for that too, and that's part of the issue with the increased health insurance costs.
Okay, thanks. How about a question either for one of you? So Westford school enrollment has been ticking down, but it looks like the cost to take care of our students is going up cumulatively. If the school enrollment's going down, why aren't our costs going down?
I'd love to
Wait,
go first. And
I
you
was
could
to say,
fill.
go ahead. I think it's a great question.
So
A lot
I
of
hear
information.
the declining enrollment question go two ways. One is why aren't the expenses and our staffing going down? And I have an answer for that. But then there's a second question about our school utilization. So first, our enrollment is down. So why isn't the budget decreasing with that, or our staff rates? In the last 8 years, we have reduced 37.8 classroom teachers to adjust for enrollment. So we are seeing declining enrollment, but we're also making adjustments along the way. Our student to teacher ratio has been steady because we keep making these responsible adjustments year over year. And like I said, over the last 8 years, that's been 37 classroom teachers.
You have some great slides
I do.
that we could show, just
Yep.
for people watching this later.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
If, Dan, is
It-
that something you could?
And I'll just keep talking while you pull
Yeah,
those up.
great.
So there has been other staff
it
added along the
slide
way,
7?
which are not classroom teachers, but fall mostly into the positions of counselors, nurse, special education, and English language learner positions. And there's so if you go to, slide 8 shows, I put this together to show our history of staffing changes. And I know it's hard to read, but if you look at these line items, one by one, what you're really seeing is I've pulled out what's based on enrollment, what staffing adjustments were made based on enrollment on the right-hand side, and again, the total at the bottom.
You can make this full screen, Dan. If you go to view, or there's probably another way to do it too.
And then on the bottom, click on the,
Yeah, on the bottom of the present down here. Yeah, over to the right.
So I got too many things blocking my.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
right.
I'm making it worse. Okay, why don't we keep going while Dan, we can see if
Yeah,
we can.
I can't even. So, and then the next slide shows that our student population has changed over time. Here we go. So even though enrollment has decreased, the blue is elementary, the yellow is high school, the red is our middle school, but the green line is what a state categorizes as high needs, and that's put together with a bunch of different categories of low income, economically disadvantaged, English learners or former English learners, or a student with disabilities. So even though our total student population has gone down, the students in front of teachers have changed. They require additional supports, different services. And so our classroom teachers have gone down, but we have added other staff along the way to meet the needs of the students in front of us. Would you like me to speak to?
Yeah, and you bring up another good question too. So if we have reduced enrollment, wouldn't we get a big gain if we consolidated the schools into fewer buildings, and wouldn't that save us a lot of money?
If you go back to slide 7, actually Valerie's already kind of talked about that. One
Yes.
more. Back one more too. Yeah, there you
So,
go.
so we did recently do an SMMA study that focused on facility conditions. One of the questions that they directly answered was, is there room for central office staff to move into a building? And the answer to that was no. And that's a dozen offices.
Right.
So the idea that we could just simply consolidate schools hasn't been directly answered, but we can extrapolate from that
Right.
answer.
We didn't task them with that question.
Right.
But they were looking at it, and SMMA is, they're an independent organization made up of engineers, architects, educational designers, that they work around the country helping to evaluate, design, and assess schools and communities as well too. And so, yeah, our question was looking at our overall building usage, and we were trying to find out, is there a way for us to rethink the space that we have for a central office? And when they looked at the way in which we were using the spaces and what we had in our buildings, they were saying that we couldn't do that. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind people what SMMA was.
There's a lot of information on social media about a 2014 utilization study that was done with using volunteers and internal staff that show like a target enrollment based on schools. And as you saw in the previous slide, since enrollment has gone down, some are wondering, well, that indicates there is space. But a lot of things have changed since 2014. Preschool are now in our elementary buildings. Kindergarten classrooms are all now full day. We offer programming to meet our changing student needs that require different spaces, like interventionists, special education services. We have medically fragile classrooms. We have deaf and hard of hearing classrooms. We have social emotional inclusive classrooms. So it's not that desks in rows and how many students can you fit into these buildings is the same as it was in 2014.
Okay, great, thank you.
And then, sorry, the
ahead. Yeah, no, please.
the last thought is that this is sort of tied to redistricting and a larger conversation that we're in the middle of with an MSBA process, but it is on our action item list for part of our strategic district improvement plan for next year. So we acknowledge that there are unanswered questions that we continue to work on.
But in terms of an immediate opportunity for savings, the careful study so far says that doesn't exist.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe this is for you, Kristen. So we're about to spend all this money on this new library. Is there any way we could tap our brakes on that, since we're in a little bit of a fiscal crisis, and look at either postponing or rescoping the project so that it's less costly?
Sure, thanks, Tom. As many of the voters and the residents know, the town of Westford has been discussing renovating and expanding the existing J.V. Fletcher Library since 2012 and perhaps before that. There's been many votes and many discussions and many allocations of study money by town meeting to move forward with that. And a few years ago, we were fortunate enough to be invited and asked to enter the Mass Library Building Commissioners Program to receive grant funds for the library building project. We were successful in doing that. So at this point in time, currently, the $32 million library budget will be covered partially by the voters through a debt exclusion and partially by the MSBA grant, as well as partially as a portion by donations that the Library Foundation is currently raising. We've checked with the state to understand if the town would want to stop the project in any way, what the mechanism would be. Knowing that we already have a signed contract with the architect and the owner's project manager, we have received a portion of grant funds that we've already paid to those said items. We would likely default on that project, and in the future, we would not be eligible for future grants related to a library building project, a school building project, or likely any other town, federal or state grants related to building projects. So we feel that it's in the best interest that we move forward with the library project. We monitor and making sure that we're staying on budget and on schedule. We do have the debt exclusion built into our debt schedule over time. And my understanding is that in the past, we had a much higher debt capacity. We're carrying that much lower right now. I know that doesn't seem much to the average person, but we are looking into every way to be as efficient with that library renovation, but moving forward to make sure that we don't lose those grant funds and that we're eligible in the future to receive grant funds for future projects.
Okay, so because of a series of commitments we've made in contracts we've signed based on a series of town meeting votes, we're already committed, and the only way to not expend the money would be for the town to go into default.
That is correct.
Okay. We got a number of questions about reserve funds. It's a little bit complicated what the reserve funds are, but the general question is, look, I can see some money stacked up in these reserve funds. Why aren't we tapping into that if we have a budget shortfall? And I know that sometimes the question relates to school reserve funds, sometimes it's more general. Why don't we start with the school reserve funds? So whether I pick the school transportation account or the cafeteria account, or why can't we tap into those, Kristen, Val, to solve our budget problem?
Well, if we want to go to slide 3, if you can bring that up, Dan, I think that's going to talk about.
Or anyone watching can also review this most recent school committee meeting where we also reviewed this information. It's a little complicated because, like you said, reserves, I've interpreted to mean through my conversations with residents to mean anything with a balance, basically, but you and I know that we refer to them as different things. There's revolving accounts, there's reserves, schools have a special education reserve fund, we have a circuit breaker. All of those things sometimes look like they have balances that aren't being used. All of the revolving accounts basically speak to a fee that we're taking in, or like a program that's being paid for by the user and is kept separate, which I think we can all agree is a good way to manage our finances. And there are rules when you create those for what they can be used for. So I think most people can understand you wouldn't use school lunch money to pay for teachers. You wouldn't use it to do anything else, right? It's got to stay in its lane. There are also some rules, some of them come with rules about how much you're supposed to have. For example, the food service is dictated by state law that it has to have 3 months of expenses. That ranges based on the school total, but can be about $750,000 to $900,000 that we have to have there. The other ones don't have like a mandated balance, but the school committee has committed, and we have a finance subcommittee, and we've committed to documenting that. This is the first sort of draft in that direction, and we will continue working on that. The question came up about offsets, and so that's how much you're using towards your operating budget from those balances, and that was originally in part of the initial draft from the superintendent and administration. There was already an increased usage of these funds, and then through the FinCom reviews and hearings, was an additional focus on that and an additional agreement to use more of them. So what the columns show you is the balance at the end of FY23. So that was June 30th, 2023. And then the change that we've made to the offsets, so that's not the total offset, that's how much in the last 6 months that we've said, yeah, you're right, we should use more of that. So I'm trying to demonstrate that the school committee is listening, that we're hearing that, we're working on that. FY25 usage column, I did realize after that should say FY25 offset usage, so it's not that that's the balance projected at the end of FY25, that's how much will be used as far as our projections can show us in the FY25 operating budget. So, and then just some notes to show that, like, school choice, for example, does have a balance that is higher than you might notice, or you might expect, and we do use that for one-time use purchases. So, for example, the elementary English language arts curriculum was just purchased and will come out of that account.
And when we knew that the special education tuitions increased for FY24, that was across the entire state. That was one of our budget challenges that Dan had alluded to earlier. We knew that we would need to use one-time funds in order to pay that bill for FY24, but we need to build it into our FY25 budget because there'll be recurring costs, so we can't continue to use the one-time funds. We just knew that we would be able to use that in that shortfall, and knowing that then we need to plan for the future.
The last 2 points I'll make is the line items with the double asterisks are where I think the finance subcommittee and the school committee have agreed that maybe that's not the optimal balance that we should have there. So we're admitting that those balances have crept up a little bit. However, even if you used them all in one lump sum, it's similar to the conversation we just had about town free cash. That just pushes the deficit to the following year and makes a bigger hole that we need to fill for recurring salaries and other expenses. So it's not best practice, but we are committed to using them gradually and in part of a strategy. And the last point I wanted to make is that although we haven't documented anything yet about, like I said, about how much should we have for elementary music as a cushion, my personal approach to this would be that if that's a program that we value, or early drop-off for elementary students, if that's a program that we value, we really should have a year's worth of expenses in there, because if there was suddenly a drop that we couldn't cover our expenses for that year, we still value offering that to the community and that opportunity for students and that service for families. So you would want to sort of not react to a fluke year and have, to be able to cover your expenses for a year. So that's the strategy that we're leaning towards.
So this is excellent for all the people on this meeting and people here who can see all this, but for people at the town meeting that won't be able to see this chart, it's first of all, we are actually drawing down many of these revolving accounts to access part of what's there for our budget. So we are doing that, but because of either government rules or because of best practice, there is an appropriate minimum level for each of these. And so it wouldn't make sense to go to zero for an account that we're using on a revolving basis to continue to fund operations. So we're working hard to establish the proper level. We have adjusted them significantly and used many of these offsets in our budget right now. We'll continue to look at this, but we don't feel comfortable at this point further reducing these, either because we're governed by regulation or because we're concerned that we would be sort of falling out of best practice here.
You summed it up better.
Maybe. Okay, I'm thinking ahead to people who won't be able to see the chart, so
No, that was
apologize for
helpful.
restatement. Okay, any other questions that have come in? Because I could do a couple more maybe, and we'll go another 10 minutes or so. So many of the if we look at salaries, you know, a lot of what the increase in requirements are relate to personnel expenses. You know, I've looked in some of these market baskets, and I see some towns that I just don't think are like us, that don't represent our ability to pay. How does a town get into these market baskets? Why do we think that that's the right way to make decisions about salary and just? I don't want to go right back to the schools right away. Maybe Chris will ask you for that. So why is it that we pick the towns that we do when some of them, if you look at them, don't seem like they're like us because
Right.
their average income's much higher?
So what we've actually done is we've followed what has become a best practice in the school industry, right? In that we're using what is called our DART districts, which is the DART stands for District Analysis Review Tool. I think T,
Yep.
yeah, I think, which is established by the Department of Education, right? And so they look at all of the student demographics throughout the state, and then every single year, they establish 10 communities, 10 school districts that are similar based on population, based on demographics of the different breakdowns that Valerie was talking about with high needs, socioeconomic, special education, English language learners, so that you're comparing similar students, right? Similar students and experiences that exist within the schools. And so what we did, historically we've been using just the DART districts as our market basket because that's what the state is establishing. When we started looking at our contracts a couple of years ago, we reached out to other communities and realized that many also use DART plus their geographic communities as well too. So what we've done is that what we established was using those 10 DART districts plus the 6 communities that are bordering Westford, so that we have 16 communities that's helping us. Now, it's not 3 points, but I'm going to say it's helping us to triangulate that data, right? Because yes, some of those demographics change. So our DART districts, because they're established by DESE, can change over time. And we knew that if we then combine that with our geographic districts surrounding us, that would help anchor that, right? And it would give us 2 different comparisons because, yes, it's where we are, but at the same time, when we look at our education system, we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to our immediate neighbors because our school system is different than our immediate neighbors as well too. So that allows us to bring those things into balance. So it allows us to look at when people are saying, well, we're not like that community. Well, our schools are like that community though. And so we're comparing both the experiences within the schools, and then we're also bringing the comparison of the economic areas surrounding us to help bring balance to it. And so we're bringing in a lot of data points so that then we can, I think, have a more robust set of information to look at. I don't know if that helps, but so what we've done is, and which has become, in short, it's become a best practice, is that you use your DART districts plus your geographic surrounding communities, and that's what we've used in order to establish that. So while it seems weird that, oh, wait a second, we're not like Wellesley, our students are, and the school system is. And so part of that should be part of the comparison.
And we're following basically the established practice for
Right.
what all schools that are
Right.
like us do.
That's
And-
right.
And that's become the norm for
Right.
recruiting talent. Okay. You know, I put this money for CPA, you know, every year. You know, given that it's a crisis, given that we're all making tough choices, is there a way that I can basically not pay the CPA funds, not pay the Community Preservation Act funds in my tax bill. So I guess there's two ways to answer that. One is to talk about the exemption
Sure.
path, and the other is we're not going to be able to address that at this town meeting. So maybe we could do that.
So the exemption part, I encourage anybody who thinks they have an issue with their assessment or want to know if there's any tax relief out there, please contact the assessor's office. They have a whole list of abatements online that they can apply for, or at least call and inquire about to see if they might qualify. The CPA is the most lenient one, which has the highest income limit. It's over $90,000, I believe. So if you're on a fixed income making less than $90,000, give a call. It might save you $300 for the year and basically wipe out the CPA tax for you or close to it. So that's the first option.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up the broader issue of what are the resources for people that are income limited, age limited, have a disability, or a veteran. There's all kinds of special categories that people can access, and we encourage them to, which will give them a path to abating some or all of their tax burden.
Yes.
I probably shouldn't say all. It can have a meaningful impact on their tax burden. And then I guess to the question of, is there a way we can just do away with funding the CPA this year because it's an extraordinary year?
Well, the answer is that we can't do it at this town meeting. That would have to be done by a town meeting, but it would have to be an article on the warrant brought either through the select board, putting it on the warrant, or as a citizen's petition. But it's not something we can do at this town meeting.
Yeah, and it's certainly a much broader discussion. We've gotten huge value out of that program for a long period of time, so we'd want to think through that really carefully if someone wanted to propose any change. Let me just open up to see if there are any other questions, and then there's a couple more questions that I have too I can ask. But I'm actually reaching towards the end of my list. If anyone else has any questions,
Nothing out
please.
there, no?
Please. So this is something I just saw with some information that I guess I just want to clarify because I've heard it from a couple people, even in some town meetings. Historically, we've seen a certain percentage increase on the school budget. It's been typically 2.5% or something like that, if depending on what year it is. This year, the percent increase year on year is lower. That seems to me like we're holding some money back, or we're not being transparent about what money's available. Why is it that the percent increase this year is lower than other years and doesn't look like every other year that I've seen? I don't know if that's an easy question. So
I honestly don't know if I understood your question.
maybe I didn't understand the question.
So,
I
I understand the question.
Okay.
I don't think, well, it's not really, my understand, I mean, we got 2.89%
Yeah.
growth last year, but without
year
the
before.
override, it's a 2% growth.
Right.
So that's more of a town allocation pie question, in my mind, than a
Right.
schools question.
Right, and I think the way I would answer that is so the way that we look at new money allocation. So each year when we have additional opportunities to have Prop 2.5 increase the tax base, if there's new growth, there's a generation of a certain amount of money. What we typically do is look at shared expenses like healthcare first, and then we look at what an allocation of the remaining money could be. In this particular case, I think it's 75% of the remaining funds after shared expenses. We went to school, 25 to town. The big point is, each year we get a different pie to split. And so if you're looking at the trend of percent allocations in terms of growth that people get, it's the way the budget works isn't to start with last year's allocation and increase it by a certain amount. It's basically to look at what the total new growth available it is, what the shared costs are, and what the allocation is. And so just the way you approach the math doesn't suggest that this year's allocation is going to be like last year or the year before. That's sort of not the way the math works. So if anyone has any question about transparency, about how that happened, we could lay all that out. That's very explicitly laid out in our budgeting process. But there's not an easy way just to say, oh, well, you're allocating less because the percent going to one department or another is less than the previous year. You have to look at all the new money available, what the new costs are, and how the allocation works. And it's not the same every year. It's going to be different depending on what the town is seeing in terms of new growth, what we're seeing in terms of shared expense changes. It's a moving target, and you have to go one level deeper in the detail to understand how that math works. Okay, anything else that we want to touch on today? 8:30 is probably a good time to stop, unless there are any other questions.
Did you have any other questions? After hearing all that?
Maybe just one more.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Hopefully be very quick. As I mentioned, I was in town for 35 years. And when I moved to this town, we were building all these new schools. And I thought the argument at the time was, yeah, but in 20, 30 years, it'll all be paid for, and our debt will go down, your tax bill will go down. What happened? Are
Yeah,
they paid
Dan,
for or
you
not?
wanna-
That's a good question.
Yeah, so Prop 2.5 allows the tax levy to go up 2.5% each year. So, that happens year after year. We usually at or right near our levy limit, so that's sort of the operating increase we have to work with. So, 30 years ago, that's gone up for 30 years. However, debt exclusion, I remember it was 99, 2000, 2002, when we built all of these new schools to WA
Yeah.
renovation. Our excluded debt was, $9 million per year on top of the tax levy. That has sunk to low right now. We have a graph somewhere, but it's really a very small percentage of the tax bill at this point in time. Basically, for excluded debt in FY24, we're paying for a very small portion of the highway garage, the Boston Road Fire Station, and the Cameron Senior Center. And those are the only 3 projects on there right now. So the library has not hit the bill yet because we haven't had to
The
borrow
schools
any
just
funds.
came off.
The schools
so-
just got paid off in '23.
Right, so your tax bill's got 2 pieces. It's got sort of the Prop
Right.
2.5 piece. It's got the debt exclusion. Those are 2 different pieces. The debt exclusion, it does drop off. When we stop paying for the schools, that part of your tax bill drops, and it actually has dropped significantly. So if on your tax bill it broke it out, you would see that the amount of money that you're paying for those debt projects has actually dropped a lot. It's at a 10-year low right now. So you actually are paying a lot less than you used to on that piece.
Okay, so one went down, the other one up, and.
Well, one's gone up 2.5% each year in the way that, well, it's a function of your assessment and other things too. But globally,
Yeah.
the amount of money we can collect from the levy, from all the taxpayers in town, goes up 2.5% a year. So that part has gone up. But your part that's paying off debt, 10, 15 years ago when we built the schools, went way up. And then was level for a long time, and now it's dropping off pretty significantly. So, I don't know, Dan, do you have any just snapshot numbers of what the excluded debt is per taxpayer this year versus 2 years ago, or? If you don't have it, if you don't have it, that's
2 years
okay.
ago, but it's, couple $100 on average house right now. It's pretty low where,
It's
back
also-
20, sorry.
Well, it's also important to note that if you're a resident, so the overall levy can increase by 2.5% per year, but that's split between commercial and residential as a function of relative value of property. And so what's happened is we've had commercial properties flat to down, homes increasing in value. So your personal tax bill is going up more than 2.5% because some of that shift is occurring within the tax base.
I think it's also important, anytime we talk about debt service, to finish out the graph and say that it's going back up, right? Like that there is a best practice for showing that the community is investing in our infrastructure and not deferring, like one of the schools is getting a new roof because it was leaking. So there is always a project sort of coming on to replace things that come off.
There we go.
So I found the graph up here,
Ta-da.
which kind of shows the history and the projects below that have sort of come off. So that orange is the schools, which you can see them falling off. The red's the fire station. So in '24, you can see that
You
low
were
right
here.
there.
So you're actually at a historic low on that part of your tax bill.
Yeah. Then we're anticipating the Blanchard roof to be on there next year. That's an MSBA project, which was funded $3 million by the state. So it's heavily subsidized. And then the library, it's going to be under construction through 25, 26, and probably open in 27. Might be 28 before we see that first big debt payment, but for right now, we're saying 27 for planning purposes. So, yeah, it's sort of level with the years before, but we're in a lull right now.
Right, so in 27, according to this forecast, you'd be about where you were in 2013 again, in terms of how much dollars you're paying on your tax bill for that.
But spread over a large, this is total excluded debt, so it's spread over a larger base, so it's actually less dollars per each household.
Oh, that's right. That's
So-
right, because there's more and more households as new growth happens.
Yeah.
So your share of that is actually even smaller than it would have been in 2013.
So your explanation makes sense to me. I worry that other people have the same knee-jerk perception reaction that I do. It's like, well, if we're at the lowest level, then why is my tax bill so high? You know, and so an explanation like this probably would benefit, you know, lots of folks in town.
I think that is part of
This
the
is-
presentation.
Isn't this
We
the
will-
exact
I
graph
think they
part of the
will actually share
presentation?
this at the
Yeah.
beginning of town meeting.
I think it's a backup slide, Kristen. Is this something maybe we should bring forward? I'm
Yeah.
not sure. So we'll
So there'll be a
discuss it.
presentation
point.
before we have the budget discussion. The town manager will make a presentation, which will include a lot of slides like this, and give that information. I still hear your point that it's
Yeah.
great for people to have this information in advance of the
advance.
meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's also important that we recognize that even though it's different buckets to us, it's one tax bill
Yeah.
and one pocketbook and one bank account.
Hence the
for
perception
taxpayer.
issue.
Yeah.
Yep, we understand.
Thank you so much for your time again.
Yeah,
You're
no,
welcome
it's our-
again.
It's our pleasure. It's
That
our
was a
pleasure.
great question. We hadn't touched on debt service yet.
Well,
Thank you.
if we, thank you. So I think if we're out of questions, we can break for now. Maybe we can just recap again. 9 o'clock, Saturday morning. But we hope people are going to their remote parking place, start, around 8. The buses are going to start running at 7:45. And we look forward to having everyone there. And I don't know, any other quick summary wrap-ups?
Nope, check-in starts at 8 and hope to see everybody there, and it's going to be a beautiful, sunny New England day.
Yes, the moderator has secured excellent weather.
So actually, just,
Yep.
do we use school bathrooms or the porta potties?
Sorry, yep, there's an amenities building
Right there,
right
yeah.
on the field, and those bathrooms will be open. They have both handicap accessible and regular bathrooms, and they're for use by all the voters.
So you won't have to leave the perimeter, as it were, to use the facilities. You'll be able to go.
Correct.
Correct. You won't have to go out through a gate and check back in or turn anything in. It's
Right.
all inside
Yep.
the fence.
And just the shuttling, there's a separate, I know you probably said this at the beginning, but there's a separate bus for both Abbott, Christoffuli, and Robinson, and people can go right there if they want to.
Yes.
They don't have to sort of drive into the traffic buildup on Patton Road and Cold Spring Road and check WA first. They can go right to Abbott if that's closer.
That's exactly right, and there are 2 buses assigned to each of those 3 sites.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do encourage, that's a great point to make. We do encourage, if you live closer to Robinson, Christoffuli, Abbott, we encourage you to go ahead and start your day there. Go ahead and park there, get on the bus. It doesn't make a lot of sense to come here and see whether or not it's been closed off yet. It's going to be much more efficient. You're going to be more efficient with your time, and we're going to be able to start more on time and get you back to your car more quickly if people go ahead and park at one of those 3 areas, if that's closer to where they live.
And you said 7:45 a.m.
That's when it starts.
That's
going.
when the buses start.
Okay, thank you so much. Why don't we go ahead and break there? Thank you, WestfordCAT, for collecting this again. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for
Westford
anybody
Cat.
listening.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a good evening.